Hey everybody, Lieutenant Joe here for the Blue Heart webcast. So the title of this particular little get-together we have here is Another Death in Minnesota. Now, for my law enforcement brothers and sisters, I think there's an understanding of what it's like to be out there, out on the road, trying to do your job when people cooperate and when they don't cooperate, and that can cause a lot of problems. But I know a lot of people watch this and other programs that I do because they're trying to have an understanding of what happened here. You know, a lot of people begrudgingly might look at the death of Renee Good in her confrontation with the ICE officers as being really difficult, unnecessary, but understandable. She did try and hit the guy with a car. He's allowed to protect himself, and she ended up dead. This one, Mr. Pretti, is having a little more difficulty, I think, for everybody, law enforcement included, because we all know how much we train to employ force in the appropriate amounts. Now, first of all, the reality here is this. This is a terrible tragedy, as it is anytime someone dies in a confrontation with law enforcement, whether it's justified or unjustified. It's a tragedy for everyone involved, and this is too. I would much rather Mr. Pretti be home right now with his family or in the hospital taking care of people who need care. I think we have to all say that in the beginning. But I think there's a lot being said out there and being done out there. Emotions are extremely high, and we can't truly comprehend the situation. We can't truly understand it and put it into perspective so that we can make a judgment on what happened here, justified or unjustified. That's what it comes down to. But the reality is that those two things are not as simple as black and white answers. There's a whole panoply of things that we have to take into account. Now, I know a lot of you don't want to do that. And I think the reality is that many people, including many of the people who've written to me and texted me and reached out, are just so emotionally angry right now that they're not thinking clearly, they're not seeing clearly, they are just emotionally reacting. And that's normal. That's a normal thing for people to do. But that is not how our justice system works. So I got an email from one woman who listens to this show. She's not law enforcement, and a couple of the other shows that I do. And she has written to me several times. She's obviously very liberal, very far to the left, very progressive. And we made some progress in our conversations, back and forth. But she just wrote to me recently and she said, okay, I can't wait to hear what Lieutenant Joe has to say about this murder and how you're going to justify it as comply or die, which seems to be another left-wing tag that they're throwing out there now, comply or die. And I'm not mad at this woman. I understand. But the reality is our justice system does not work when we just allow emotion to run wild. Words mean things. We're hearing a lot of people who are conflating a bunch of things. And Mr. Pretti is simply the vehicle which to express those things. I think, honestly, they are angry. They feel a sense of injustice. They feel a sense of anger. But I don't think it's just at this particular situation, because these same people, in reality, come on, were they just as upset over Lake and Riley getting killed? No, they didn't say a word. They're upset with this because it is connected to something else in their life. And that thing that it's connected to is their hatred and disagreement of President Trump and his policies, and it's Trump derangement syndrome to a large degree. Now, I thought that was a funny term that people came up with a couple years ago. But the more I've looked at it, the more it absolutely is true. People are psychologically damaged by this hatred they have for Donald Trump, and therefore it colors everything they see. And sometimes they can't see clearly. I see all the comments now. People I know, people I went to school with that I thought were pretty reasonable people. They're on there going, okay, you MAGA animals, you Trumpers, let's, look at this now, what you caused, right? So right off the bat, they're not talking about the interaction between Mr. Pretti and law enforcement and how it went right or it went wrong. They're throwing out there, you MAGAs, you Trumpers. So it shows that connection very, very clearly. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. They don't want to look at themselves and say, well, I'm reacting because of this. There's a sense of injustice that this wasn't right. And like I said at the beginning, anytime something like this happens, it's horrible. It's horrible for Mr. Pretti, for his family, his friends, for everyone who knew him and loved him, that he's gone. He's dead, right? But the law and justice demands that we remove emotion from the situation and we review it for what it is. And it'll come out. The facts will bring out what happened here. So there's a couple of choices. So first thing I'm going to do is we need to understand the words. Words are important. So my book, The Investigation, because I'm talking about criminal investigation, and in this book, I use a homicide that I investigated as the learning tool, as the vehicle to move the learning. Well, one of the first things I did in this book is I figured we have to understand the words. We have to understand what words mean. And I don't like to read out of things, but, one of the first things I put here is homicide. What is a homicide? Well, homicide recognizes that there are different kinds of killing of people. So, and then I break them down: murder, manslaughter, justifiable homicide, excusable homicide, homicide by misadventure, negligent homicide, reckless homicide, vehicular homicide, all of these different kinds of things. And you say, well, how can that be? It's murder. And this is where the problem comes in. Murder is a very specific thing. And people want to believe that. And this is where I think people are connecting their anger, their Trump derangement syndrome, their hatred of Trump and conservatives and conservative policy and all that it means. They're connecting that to this incident. So as an investigator, as a human being, I have to look at this situation without emotion and try and figure out what happened here. So people screaming and calling it murder. It's murder. It's murder, because we don't really understand words. People aren't in court. They aren't, lawyers parse things into 1,000 different things. Our law does that as well, because there are different examples. If somebody was trying to break into your house and you protected your home by killing that person, is that a murder? No, the person's still dead. You did it. But was it a murder? It's not a murder, because there are different motivations that go along with the things that we do that determine what something is. So again, I'll go to the book, The Investigation, and the first one I put in there, first definition besides homicide, is murder. And here's the definition. Murder is the deliberate taking of another person's life with malice aforethought. That is done purposely, with planning beforehand and with the intent to kill. This motivation must be established at trial for the finding of murder in the first degree in most jurisdictions. It is malice aforethought that distinguishes murder from other forms of homicide. So there are many different levels of homicide, of taking a person's life, right? And we kind of went over that. So when I look at this as a law enforcement officer, I don't like how it looked. I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. I looked at the Renee Good death, and I saw there was a lot of contributing factors, but it was inevitable what was going to happen once she decided, she made the decision to put that car in gear and go forward towards the officer, that getting killed, getting shot was a distinct possibility for her, and that's what ended up happening. In this case, when we watch the videos and we see what took place, we saw an encounter where ICE was doing, actually it was Border Patrol, was doing a job, my dog is even concerned about, was doing a job, a particular job. They were trying to make an arrest. They have a legitimate task at hand. It's lawful. They are law enforcement officers. They have a legitimate task to take someone into custody, to arrest someone, right? And that doesn't mean when it's convenient for the person, or, you know, when they have to go to a picnic, or not before they go to church. The reality is, if someone is wanted, they get arrested when law enforcement can find them and take them into custody. So in this particular case, they were doing an operation, the law enforcement personnel, Border Patrol. Mr. Pretti was there, and a woman got shoved and pushed out of the way. Why did she get shoved and pushed out of the way? Because she was in the way of the officers. We can't go around that. We can't get around that. I am a proponent. Protesting, I think, is legitimate. You don't like something, you protest. There's things I like to protest. But the reality is, you have to protest in a particular way. Otherwise, everything's out of control. So you protest, you stand on a sidewalk with a sign, you yell and scream, you bang your drums, whatever it is you want to do. You do not interfere with law enforcement officers doing their work. You don't stand in front of them. You don't get in their face. You don't spit at them. You don't throw rocks and bottles and chunks of ice. You don't wave your hands at them. You don't touch them. You do not interfere with their arrest. You don't do that. If you do all that, you're wrong, and those are crimes that you should be held accountable to. That being said, I watch this video and I see this start to unfold. Woman gets shoved. Mr. Pretti is there. He doesn't like it. He thinks it's inappropriate. He goes in to try and help this woman. He puts his hand on the officer. A scrum involves, and I like that they talk that out. It's scrum. Okay, it's a conflict. Now you have multiple officers there because they need to have multiple officers, because the politicians in Minnesota will not have the local police assist the federal law enforcement. Therefore, they have to do two jobs. They have to do their arrest job and crowd control and riot control and protect themselves from the crowds, which have shown they will be violent. And I know some of you right now, especially people on the left, you already can't see through your anger and your upsetness. You're already screaming, you're justifying it. I haven't said a word yet about whether I think it was justified or not. I haven't said a word about that. I'm trying to lay the groundwork of clear thinking looking at an event like this. Okay? Juxtapose it with the Laken Riley murder. Now, that was a murder. This young man targeted this girl, assaulted her, and then purposely took her life. And that was his intent, to take her life, to keep her quiet. He murdered her. That was his intent when he went out there, to find a victim, right? This case, we have officers doing a legitimate job and citizens who have been enraged that they don't like the law being followed. And that's again, we got to follow it back. What is it they're so upset about, that rapists and pedophiles are being arrested to be removed from the country? Well, it's not that they like rapists and pedophiles. They don't like that illegal aliens are being removed. They think they should be allowed to stay. So that's firing them up. They don't care what the law is. They think these people should be allowed to stay, and ICE is illegitimately doing that. Plus, they've been told their anger, their upsetness, their rage has been fed by politicians who see benefit in doing that. All right, so I'm getting off, but I want to make sure that we're still on the same page here. So Mr. Pretti goes over and interferes with the officer. He didn't like the woman being shoved. He didn't think it was right. That's unfortunate. That's something you take up in a court. Did the officer shove the woman inappropriately? He'll have to pay a penalty for that if he did the wrong thing. So she gets shoved. He goes to try and help her. Now, in the moment, you know, there's a reason they call it fog of war, the heat of battle. Unless you've been there and done it, you have no idea what that's like. You just don't. People think they do. How many armchair quarterbacks do we have watching? Well, I would have done this. I would have done that. They never should have done this. Is not the right. Unless you've been in the middle of one of those things, one of those potentially bad things, you don't know what it's like. You don't know how it feels. You don't know how it changes your perception of things, which is the next thing we want to look at. The courts, the Supreme Court, all after the Supreme Court of the United States, has looked at interactions between law enforcement officers and citizens when there's been an injury or a death. And one of the things that the courts recognized, 9-0, even the liberals on the court had to recognize the reality of this, is that you have to take into consideration the totality of the circumstances. Now, for my friends on the left right now, I know your heads are blowing up because you just see murder. And Lieutenant Joe's trying to justify it. I'm not justifying anything. I'm helping walk you through this so you can think clearly to come to an understanding of whether it was justified or not justified, whether it was murder, whether it was manslaughter, whether it was unintentional, whether it was intentional. See, there's all these different layers we have to figure out before we can make a judgment on what happened here. So I'm trying to give you the... So Mr. Pretti goes over to interfere because he didn't like this woman got pushed. He doesn't like that ICE is out there doing their job anyway. And now you have this scrum that takes place. And people are wrestling around. Now, did he simply say, okay, I should have done it, but I didn't do it. But you know what? Let me just lay on the ground, put my hands behind my back, and get handcuffed. And again, heads are exploding. He shouldn't have to do that. No, he does. That's what we all have to do when law enforcement tries to take us into custody. We submit to the arrest, whether we like it or not, believe it or not believe it. That's what you're supposed to do. He should have submitted to the arrest. He should have told the officers, I'm armed. I'm a legal permit carrier. No problem with that. You're a legal permit carrier. I carry a gun everywhere I go. I'm a legal permit carrier, right? Many people are. So he should have submitted immediately. He shouldn't have interfered with what they were doing. Once he was handcuffed, he could say, listen, I'm armed. I'm a permit carrier. My gun is on my hip. They would have removed the gun and taken him into custody. That's a reality. That's a truth. You cannot like that truth. You can, he had no right to interfere and do the things that he did. Does that mean he should have gotten killed? No, it does not. It does not mean that at all. But we have to look at what the court said, the totality of the circumstances. That means everything that went on and the officer's mindset. Now, we already talked about the difference between the different types of homicides. Murder is specifically going, I'm going to kill this man because I don't like him. I don't care for him. I don't like his hat. I don't like what he stands for. That's murder, right? Is that what happened here? So we have to look at this. All right, so the totality of the circumstances. Have the officers that are involved, Border Patrol, ICE, have they been able to do their job all over Minnesota where they have a legitimate reason to do their work and legitimate authority to conduct raids and arrests and everything else? That's all legitimate. You might not like it, but it's all legitimate. So this confrontation takes place. And in the course of that, they're wrestling on the ground. Now that, like I said, unless you've been involved in one of those things, you have to really say to yourself, I can imagine, I think I know what it might be like, but you don't. The totality of the circumstances, these officers have been interfered with all over the city. They've been assaulted. They have been, people tried to hit them with cars. A guy, one of the ICE agents had his finger bitten off the other day. They're getting rocks and bottles and things thrown at them day and night. This, you can say, well, they shouldn't be there. It wouldn't happen. But that's not legitimate. Legitimate is they're there to do a law enforcement task, a job. That's legitimate and legal. And they have a right to do it. And people are not just protesting. They're not waving signs. We hate ICE. Get out of ICE. ICE, get out of here. Leave our friends alone. That's legitimate. They are getting in the road, getting in the way, trying to pull the officers off, trying to let people out of cars, hitting people with cars. All of this has been going on for weeks. Now, these officers are living with this every single day. Well, they should be better than that. They should be trained. They're human beings, right? And they are trained. But you know what? There's a thing that things build up and you start to anticipate. The last 3 times we went to make an arrest, the crowd came out and did this. So therefore, you're preparing that might happen again. So what am I going to do this time? You learn from each one of these encounters, don't we? Law enforcement guys and girls, don't we learn from these encounters that what might happen next, we have to be prepared for? So let's go back now. We have the totality of the circumstances. It's chaotic. People are very forward. They're interfering illegally. They are coming after the officers. There's a history of officers who've been injured, almost hit by cars, all kinds of things. Now they have this guy who interferes with what they're doing, whether he liked it or not. The woman getting pushed, she shouldn't have been in their face, and she wouldn't have got pushed. She was on the sidewalk, she wouldn't have got pushed. And we can't discount that. Well, if the guy didn't rob the store, he wouldn't have got shot. Well, that's true. If he didn't go in there to rob the store and the cops showed up and shot him, he wouldn't have got shot. There are realities that our emotions prevent us from seeing truth. All right. And again, I'm not justifying or unjustifying what happened here, laying out the facts, how to think about it. So Mr. Pretti involves himself in this situation. He gets shoved back. Then the officer decides, I'm going to pepper spray him. What's the purpose of the pepper spray? The purpose of the pepper spray is to cause pain and uncomfort so that the person backs away. That's what it's there for. That's called less than lethal tools that officers have. All right, so officers don't immediately go to deadly force. There's a continuum. And the continuum raises the level of force based on what? The officer not liking the person? No. The level of the use of force on the continuum goes up depending on what the people the officers are interacting with, what they do. Put your hands behind your back, and they do it. That's it, verbal. You handcuff them, you take them away. You're under arrest, put your hands behind your back, and they start to pull away. You put hands on them. All these people screaming, don't touch me. You have no right to touch me. Yes, they do. They have every right to put hands on you if you're not following a legal order. Whether you like it or not, that's the law. You decide to pull away, and now the officers have a couple of options. If they're going to arrest you, right? If they're going to arrest you, they can pepper spray you to incapacitate you so you can't see and you can't fight, and they can get control of you. The officers are allowed to use a baton if you're fighting back. The officers don't have to lose the confrontation, right? So they're allowed to use a baton if they have it, to do a couple of different kinds of hits that tell you, I better stop fighting. This isn't good. That's the idea, to get them under control. If a weapon is produced, the officer doesn't have to get shot or stabbed. The officer can then go to the highest level on the use of force continuum and use deadly force to protect themselves or someone else. Now, this is where calm, rational thinking is important here, because we have to put together all of these factors unique to this confrontation, as well as court rules and everything else that we go by, to make a determination what happened here. Was it justified, unjustified? Was it somewhere in the middle? Were mistakes made? Absolutely legitimate reality. Right? Officers make mistakes. They see things and react to things that they see, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. So when we look at this situation, let's go back to our scrum now. You have an individual who interfered with the officers. No matter how righteous you think he was, he shouldn't have done it. Now they're wrestling around, and somebody sees a gun on this guy. Somebody sees a gun. Now, it's pretty clear one of the officers went over and took the gun out of the guy's holster or out of his waistband, saw the gun and removed it. But they still shot him. They murdered him. Time out. This is where your lack of experience of being involved in these things, in the fog of war, and that's what this is, this conflict, this is combat that's going on. Now you got somebody in the video screaming, gun, 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 which means telling all the officers, not that the cops got guns, we all know that the person on the bottom of the pile or the person resisting or has a weapon. You have now increased the danger to every one of those officers. Right? Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. So somebody sees the weapon. Now, in that conflict of taking him into custody, trying to get control of him, an officer saw an opportunity and took the gun away from him. Apparently, the other officers did not see that. That's what it looks like. Now, we'll see body cams, we'll see officer statements, we'll look at 72 different angles here, and we'll have to make a determination of what actually happened without the emotional, they killed him, they executed him. No, they did not. They did not do that, I can tell you. Whether they were justified or not, that's what we're going to find out. But in this case, the officer takes the gun and goes away. It looks like, it appears that as that officer was walking away with this Mr. Pretti's gun, that the gun went off, the gun fired. Now, I've seen videos with that same exact model of gun that shows you can have the gun fire without pulling the trigger, apparently. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I've seen videos where I have an expert, a guy who claims to be an expert, he's got that gun, he loads it, and he's pushing on the slide in the front, and the gun goes off like 6 times in a row. Maybe that's possible. Reports on the news that that gun is prone to functioning, shooting a bullet without pulling the trigger. It could be a design flaw, could be whatever. I don't know. See, we don't know, but it appears that as that officer walks away with that gun, looks like the gun goes off. Now, the officers in the scrum that are in this pile with a resisting man who interfered with their actions, whether you think he was justified to interfere or not, he pushed a woman. That's terrible. The officer should be held accountable if he did something wrong pushing that woman. But that doesn't mean you get to jump in and interfere with the officers. Right? Now, they're in this pile. You hear gun, gun, gun. Somebody saw the gun, and that's what we're trained to do, scream out gun so everybody knows there's a gun. Another officer gets a hold of that gun, and it looks like it goes off. Now, from my experience there, unless I saw that gun go off over there where that officer is, or if I'm looking here where the fight's going on, which I'm probably looking at the guy I'm fighting with, not over there, and a gun goes off, I don't know that that guy didn't get a hold of that gun and he's shooting at me and the officers. Now, you might not like that because he didn't have the gun. He didn't have the gun. I know he didn't have the gun. I agree. I saw the gun leave the scene. But the reality is, remember, the totality of the circumstances. Sometimes this is uncomfortable. But the totality of the circumstances is that did the officers perceive gun, gun, gun? There's a gun on the scene. Then a gun goes off. They're fighting with a guy that had a gun, that's interfering, that's resisting. Did the officers at that moment perceive that they were in danger? And did that officer, who appears that when you hear gun, 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 he draws his weapon because his partners are screaming, somebody's got a gun, somebody better get ready, right? He draws his gun and now he sees the guy moving. Did he think, hearing the gunshot, hearing gun, 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 in a fight with a resisting individual, think that that person had the weapon and just fired it? And therefore, to protect himself and the other officers, did he fire his gun and hit Mr. Pretti, ultimately, who died? This is the reality of having to look at this situation, not just by the outcome, but what led to it. Does that mean it's not a tragedy? Of course it's a tragedy. It's horrible. A man lost his life, right? He was just out there protesting. He was out there just interfering. He was just out there getting in the way, and he ended up dead. That's terrible for him and his family. For us, for all of us as Americans, it's terrible to watch this going on. But that's how we have to look at this. So by our own definitions, to say that it was murder, for you people out there saying murder, murder is throwing that word on a law enforcement confrontation is like throwing gasoline on a fire, right? Because murder is very specific. That would mean that those officers saw Mr. Pretti and said, oh, let's kill this guy. We don't like what he stands for. We don't like that he's protesting. We don't like that he's trying to stop us from doing our job. Let's kill him. That would be murder. That would be murder. Is that what happened here? Is that what you really think happened here? That those officers are out there doing that? Remember, totality of the circumstances. They're legitimately in Minnesota. They are conducting a legitimate law enforcement operation. They were interfered with illegally. Mr. Pretti resisted illegally. And I'm not even getting to the fact that he's a permit holder, gun holder, and he's supposed to have ID until the cops said, I'm not even going to get into that. It happened too quick for that. So reality, these things happen very fast. And the courts recognize that as well. Officers have to make split-second decisions based on their perception of what's going on, not your perception of watching a video or being angry with Trump or thinking I shouldn't be there or anything else that's going on. The courts recognize that in that moment, the officers are legitimate. They're doing a legitimate job. The situation got out of hand, and the officers reacted based on what they perceived at the moment. Now we have to stitch that all together. Now, based on the officer's statement, other statements people say, we'll find out. Was it a murder? Did they go there and say, let's kill that guy? I don't like that guy. I don't like that he's protesting. Let's kill him. If they do that and they can find that, there's statements to that effect, that's murder. Then you charge murder and you go to trial. What's less than that, though? Like I told you in the book, get the book, the investigation, learn when you're trying to figure out these things. Next down is manslaughter. Manslaughter is the unlawful taking of another human being under circumstances other than murder without express or implied malice. This includes reckless actions that cause the death, such as like when you punch somebody in a bar fight. You're fighting. You the guy's a jerk. You're a jerk. You're fighting. You're arguing, and he falls down, busts his dome, and dies. The guy's dead. It's a homicide. But is it murder? Did you intend to kill him? No, you want to punch him in the face, get him away from you, and he hit his head and died. That's manslaughter. There was no intent to kill him, but he ended up dead anyway. Now the court looks at all of those factors. It doesn't say murder. It wasn't a murder. He didn't go there intending to kill the guy. It happened in the confrontation. So is that what happened here? Is this a confrontation that went bad? And the officers acted recklessly? Right? They acted recklessly that caused the death. An unlawful killing. See, so this is where all of these terms and case law makes a difference. So unlawfully killing him. So first of all, we have to go back now to what was the officer's perception, what led up to this, the scrum, the gun, the gunfire. If it turns out that the court looks at this and says, in the totality of the circumstances, the officer thought he was in danger and he took action, firing his service weapon and killing Mr. Pretti, then it's not unlawful. Then it's not unlawful if he acted under the law that exists. Therefore, it wouldn't be manslaughter. Right? Would it be a justifiable homicide? Could be. Somebody breaks into your home, you tell them to get out, your wife and children are in that house, and this person's coming in, they're carrying a baseball bat, and you have a handgun or a shotgun. You tell them, get out of my house, and they keep coming forward, and you shoot them. The totality of the circumstances. What happened here? Guy broke into your house. Well, he just wanted your stuff. Did you see that woman screaming and hollering? Her son robbed the guy, and the guy killed him, and all he wanted to do was rob you, and you murdered him. Ridiculous. We're ridiculous with some of our thoughts. So the burglar breaks into your house. He's got a baseball bat. Maybe he didn't have a baseball bat. Maybe he came in, and when he saw you with the gun, he picked up something in your living room, a little metal statue. He's going to beat you over the head with it. Doesn't matter. If you felt, and a reasonable person felt in danger for me and my family at that moment, and you fire and kill that person, was it murder? It was not murder. Was it manslaughter? Well, if you were justified in doing what you did, it wasn't unlawful. Therefore, it could be a justifiable homicide. A police officer pulls over a car, and the driver hops out with a gun and starts shooting at the officers. They return fire and kill the man. It's not murder. It's not manslaughter. It's a justifiable homicide. Force was used against them. They went right up the continuum to deadly force because that was being sent on them. And it's justifiable. Okay? Get the book. Civilians and Cops. Let's all get on the same page here with things. All right. So now let's go back to Mr. Pretti in the situation. I'm going to wrap this up. I know I've been going a little bit here. Is it terrible and horrible that he is dead? It is. He's a human being. He has family. He has friends. People love him. Obviously, he's a great guy. He's a nurse. Nurses are awesome, right? But we have to look at the facts. Is it a murder? It's not a murder. Is it a manslaughter? Maybe. If the court and everybody else determines based on the facts that a reasonable officer would not have thought they were in danger, and therefore it was reckless what the officer did, then the officer will probably be held account. Manslaughter, some kind of manslaughter, reckless manslaughter. That's a reality. We all know that going into the job when we go there. If we do things wrong purposely, that can be one thing that we did. If we do something wrong negligently, carelessly, that can be another responsibility we have to carry as law enforcement officers. In this case, we're going to find out. We're going to find out by an investigation. Now, I know people don't want to hear that. You see an unarmed man got shot. Well, unarmed men get shot all the time, justifiably. You know, I'm 220 pounds. And if I'm fighting a 390-pound linebacker who's 27 years old and he wants to choke me to death and he don't have a gun and I feel I'm going to die, I can use deadly force to protect myself. He's an unarmed man. But his hands were weapons. His size was a weapon. A car can be a weapon. There's a lot of things out there that put people in danger, and we don't have to get hurt. Anybody, civilian or a law enforcement officer, right? So, Mr. Pretti, let's look at this. The officer may have been wrong. He may have misjudged. He may have overreacted. He may have done 100 things improper, and he'll be held to account if he did that. If the facts show he did something purposely wrong, he'll be held to account. If he did something recklessly, negligently, carelessly, he might be held to account for that. That's how the system is set up, right? He also might be found, based on the totality of the circumstances, that he thought his life and the life of his partners was in danger, and he took action to protect himself and those officers. And unfortunately, horribly, Mr. Pretti is dead. Now, I wouldn't want that to happen to somebody in my family. I wouldn't want it to happen to me. But let's look now at the next thing that's uncomfortable, especially for my friends on the left, who right now the smoke's coming out of your ears, you're babbling, you're spitting foam up at the mouth. I understand. I've talked to you many times. I've emailed and talked to you in person. These are facts. This is reality. I don't like it that this man's dead. You don't like it. Doesn't take away from the reality that the officers were there legitimately to do a legitimate job. They are law enforcement officers, and citizens have a duty to comply with law enforcement, not interfere, not get in their way, not harass them. You can protest, stand on the side with your sign and wave, you hate everybody in the world. Doesn't matter. You're allowed to do that, and I support you. Do not get in the way of law enforcement. It's dangerous. Things can happen purposely, accidentally, right? And people can end up dead. So let's look at Mr. Pretti. And again, I have great sympathy for him and his family, and my whole country I have, and for the officers. He could have been protesting on the side of the road. He didn't like that woman got pushed. Well, I didn't like it either. I don't like to see a woman pushed and shoved. I've ever watched 1,000 of those videos where the officers are shoving these people out of the way. I've been in those scenes where people get in your face, they're coming at you. Well, you don't have to take a beating. You don't have to be harassed. You don't have to be impeded with. You have a job to do, a legal job. You shove them out of the way. That's probably the least you could do when someone's right on top of you coming at you. Shove them out of your way. Maybe they'll get the idea. When that didn't seem to work, when Mr. Pretti kept coming, now the officer sees him with this woman. What's going on there? Is he wrestling with it? What? So they try and pull him off. This guy is out of control. Let's pull him off. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's what it looked like to me on the video. Mr. Pretti is now with this woman, and is he helping her? could have been helping her, could have been picking her up. I don't know what their situation was. The officer decides, okay, pepper spray is the answer. Let me spray these people, back them up, and that'll be that. And he sprays them and backs them up. Then they made the decision, for whatever reason, and we'll find out, that they were going to take him into custody. Did he submit to being arrested? Doesn't look like he did. Looks like he resisted. Now, why? Maybe because he had pepper spray in his face and he was disoriented. It's possible. Maybe he was just so angry with ICE for doing their job that he doesn't think they should be doing. Maybe because the mayor told him, you should stand up to these people. So he's going to fight. Whatever, he fought. He was down on the ground. He's carrying a gun. The officer sees the gun. An officer removes the gun. Gun goes off. An officer maybe, I don't know, whether he perceived that the gunfire was coming from the bad guy. Maybe he didn't see the gun was taken away by the other officer. There's gunfire on the pile. Well, it's not the other cop shooting at you. It's going to be the bad guy. Right? In this case, Mr. Pretti was the bad guy because he was resisting and impeding. And the officer took action. Now, ultimately, that action will be defined by a court. And if the court finds the officer acted purposely, negligently, recklessly, the officer will be held to account by the laws of our nation. And he will have a trial. People will determine, was he right or wrong in doing what he did? Either way, it doesn't bring Mr. Pretti back. He doesn't come back. And that's the tragedy in this situation. So what's the lessons we can all learn? For all my friends out there in Minnesota and every other city and state where you don't like what's going on. Well, first of all, go to your legislature and tell them, we want an open border. We want everybody to be able to come in and be left alone. That's the first thing you do. Go and protest. Go put your signs up. Let everybody in. Everybody's a person. There is no illegal person, right? Whatever you want to say, do that. Do not go out into the street and impede a law enforcement operation. Do not get in the middle of it. Do not go in and scream and yell in the face of officers that are conducting their work. Do not try and pull people out of cars. Do not try and pull the officers away. Do not try and stop the officers from making an arrest. These are the lessons we learn. Protesting is legitimate, and I support your right to protest. I think most officers do. We're constitutional kind of people. We live and breathe. We walk the Constitution every day. But don't interfere with law enforcement. Don't get in the way of law enforcement. Don't impede them. Don't hurt them. Don't put your hands on them. And if we do that, the chances of us getting injured or killed by law enforcement is almost zero. Right? So that's what I wanted to talk about. So for all those people out there who wrote to me, emailed to me, talked to me, and said, we're just going to see Lieutenant Joe's just going to say, comply or die. You're not really thinking clearly. You need to ask yourself, why am I not thinking clearly? I disagree with this. I don't think these Trumpers, these MAGAs. Well, if you're thinking like that, you're not thinking clearly. And if you're not thinking clearly, how can you make a judgment on anything? So ask yourself, why am I so upset? Am I upset because I really want people from all over the world to be able to come here without a problem? That everybody should be able to come here. I believe that. Then you vote for people who are going to give you that. Right? I don't think ICE should be out there. Well, your local police are out there and you'll get arrested if you do something illegal and they see it, whether you like it or not. This is how our system works. You work through your legislature to change things. You don't go out and get in the way of the cops. Very simple. If Ms. Good got out of the car when she was told, if she wasn't blocking the road, she wouldn't have come in contact with the ICE officers. If she had gotten out of the car when she was told to get out of the car, she wouldn't have had a bigger confrontation. If she didn't drive towards the officer and hit him with her car, she wouldn't have got shot. Unfortunate all the way around. If Mr. Pretti had been on the sidewalk and protesting, legitimate, the minute he stepped in to the road and got in the way of the officers, put a hand on the officers, tried to interfere with the officers, that led to the cascading set of events, Terrible. That led to the confrontation that led to his death. Now, I'm not saying he's responsible for his death. We're going to find out. The courts are going to tell us, was the officer right or was the officer wrong? I wasn't on the scene, but I've been in those kind of scrums. I know what it's like. I know what that fog is like. The court takes that into account. As terrible and tragic as it is, if he stayed on the sidewalk and waved his sign and screamed and hollered, and I know he didn't have a sign saying, could have had a sign, right? He'd be with his family and friends today. So there's our lesson for everybody out there. You want to protest, go do it. Don't commit crimes while you're doing it. Don't interfere with the police. All right. And I'm sorry if that hurts somebody's feelings, but that's how I feel about it. And I hope that we come to some kind of a resolution of this quickly and we understand going forward. The politicians there, the first thing you should do is turn around this sanctuary nonsense of saying you're not going to support the law. You're not going to support law enforcement, and get out there and help the officers do their job. You don't agree with it? Change the laws. All right. This is Lieutenant Joe for the Blue Heart webcast. I appreciate you being out there, and be safe, my brothers and sisters.